Good day, students of economics. The purpose of this video is to review the principles of market economics. By now, students should have familiarized themselves with market economics. Therefore, this is a brief review, assuming students have already read the chapter content on market economics and familiarized themselves with these important principles. What is a market? A market is an institution which brings together buyers and sellers. Assume there are a large number of buyers and a large number of sellers. It's the rationing function of prices, the invisible hand, that leads us to the outcome economists are interested in. And that outcome is called equilibrium. Identify on the graph, price is measured on the vertical axis, quantity measured on the horizontal axis. Economists are most interested in the behavior of buyers and sellers and how their interactions lead to equilibrium on the graph labeled P star and Q star. Remember, in the product market, the buyers, the downward sloping demand curve, are households and the sellers are businesses. And in the resource market, it's the opposite. The downward sloping demand curve are businesses. Businesses demand the economic inputs, factors of production of land, capital, and labor, and households supply those inputs. The downward sloping demand curve, what is demand? It's a schedule of the various amounts of a good or service or resource that buyers are willing and able to purchase, series of prices, specified amount of time. The downward sloping demand curve demonstrates that inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. Price goes up, there'll be a decrease in quantity demanded. Price declines, there'll be an increase in quantity demanded. Economists refer to this idea as the law of demand. Why is there an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded? 4 reasons. Common sense, diminishing marginal utility, the income effect, and substitution effect. If you do not remember these, please review them. Other things equal, a change in price will cause a movement along a single demand curve. What is supply? The various amounts of a good or a service or a resource that sellers are willing and able to make available for sale, series of prices, specified amount of time. So that schedule of price versus quantity supplied. There is a direct relationship between price and quantity supplied. Price up, an increase in quantity supplied. Producers are incentivized to make more available for sale. Price down, a decrease in quantity supplied. The ever important P star Q star equilibrium. Buyers are attempting to maximize utility, the happiness, satisfaction, and gratification from consuming a good or service or acquiring a resource. Sellers are trying to maximize profit, as if led by the invisible hand, the rationing function of prices. The market brings us to this point where quantity demanded is equal to quantity supplied, equilibrium. Remember, equilibrium is a starting point, a launching point, not a permanent position. Demand is the various amounts of a good, a service, or a resource that buyers are willing and able to purchase, a series of prices, specified amount of time, other things equal. Supply, the various amounts of a good, a service, or a resource that producers or sellers willing and able to make available for sale, series of prices, other things equal. What happens when something other than price changes? Economists call these the non-price determinants. There are 5 non-price determinants of demand and 6 non-price determinants of supply. Read it, learn it, live it. Print these out, put them under your pillow. Memorize the 5 non-price determinants of demand, the 6 non-price determinants of supply. More importantly, understand how these factors or events will affect equilibrium, price, and quantity in the market. Let's focus up top on the left, graph A, demonstrating a rightward shift increase in demand. How will an increase in demand affect equilibrium price in the market? When there's a rightward shift in the demand curve, an increase in demand, the ultimate effect on equilibrium price and quantity is price in the market up, quantity up. What will cause an increase in demand? Well, an increase in the taste or preference for a good, service, or resource, an increase in the number of buyers, an increase in buyers' income, assuming we're analyzing the market for a normal good, right? When you talk about substitutes, An increase in the price of a substitute will increase the demand for the good under consideration. A decrease in the price of a complementary good will increase demand. And then expectations, right? Remember, expectations about future product price, future product availability, and future income. If consumers expect or buyers expect higher prices in the future, that will increase demand now. If buyers are worried about product availability in the future, that will increase demand now. And then finally, about buyers' income. If buyers collectively, say wage earners, feel good or believe their incomes will increase in the future, that will increase demand now. Right? Up top on the left graph, B as in boy, a decrease in demand. So how will a leftward shift or a decrease in demand affect equilibrium price and quantity? Right? Shift from D1 to D2. When there's a decrease in demand, it drives down equilibrium price. It also drives down quantity at the new equilibrium. So when a leftward shift in demand, new equilibrium price down, quantity down. What will cause a decrease in demand? Well, decrease in the taste or preference of a good, service, or resource. A decrease in the number of buyers. If we're talking about buyers' income, a decrease in buyers' income if it's a normal good, or an increase in buyers' income if there is an inferior good under consideration. Remember, inferior goods are things like retreaded tires, generic store brand items, used car, thrift store clothing, right? Price of related good, what will cause a decrease in demand for, right? So if there is a decrease in the price of a substitute, that will decrease the demand for the good under consideration. An increase in the price of a complementary good decreases demand. And then those ideas of expectations. Right? If consumers expect prices to fall in the future, there'll be decrease in demand for that product or service today. If consumers aren't so worried about product availability, there'll be a decrease in demand today. And if there's a worry about future income, expectations of future income may be lower because wage earners, people in the labor force, believe that the economy may be heading into a recession, decrease in demand. Now the non-price determinants of supply, the supply shifters. Again, first, down bottom on the right, identify how an increase in supply will ultimately affect equilibrium price and quantity. A rightward shift in the supply curve increases quantity and decreases price. So a rightward shift of the supply curve at the new equilibrium, price down, quantity up. What will cause an increase in supply? A rightward shift in the supply curve, as demonstrated by graph C down bottom on the left. What will cause that? Well, producers, manufacturers, firms, they need to acquire resources, land, capital, and labor, the factors of production, the economic inputs. When there's a decrease in the price of inputs, factors, resources, when the price of land, capital, and labor declines, there'll be a rightward shift in the supply. The market supply curve will shift to the right, driving down equilibrium price and increasing equilibrium quantity. An increase in the number of sellers will shift the supply curve to the right. Taxes. Any reduction in taxes on businesses will shift the curve to the right, the supply curve to the right. Remember, the old adage, if you want more of something, tax it less. If you want less of something, tax it more. If the government increases subsidies, now think of subsidies as taxes in reverse. The government actually hands out monies to some producers. So Operation Warp Speed during the COVID pandemic, pharmaceutical giants like Pfizer, Merck, J&J, right, Moderna received large subsidies to invest in research and development to increase the output of vaccines for the COVID-19 virus. Right, so an increase in subsidies will shift the supply curve to the right. Any improvement in technology will increase supply. Right, price of other goods. This is an interesting non-price determinant. Assume a manufacturer can shift production between two types of output with ease or relative efficiency. So think of a farmer can plant either corn or soy. So if you're considering what happens in the market for soy if the farmer believes that the price of corn will decline in the future. So the farmer can plant soy and corn and easily use the land, capital, and labor to manufacture either one of those. So if we're talking about the market for soy and the farmer believes the price of corn will decline, you would expect that the farmer would produce more soy based on the price of other good. Now that only applies if a firm can easily shift resources between two types of outputs. The book also talks about, in addition to substitutes of output, complementary types of other goods. In other words, they use the example of what if an energy company drills for oil and the byproduct is natural gas, because that process of extracting oil from the ground actually produces natural gas. So if the price of natural gas were to go up, it would encourage manufacturers to produce more oil based on the idea that they will get the natural gas as a complementary good with the production process. And again, that's a rare occurrence because that doesn't always happen. Like you're not making ping pong tables and all of a sudden you're like, hey, look, part of making ping pong tables is we got these cardboard boxes as a byproduct. So that's a rare occurrence. Right? Now, price expectations. Again, this is probably the least used or applicable non-price determinant of supply. But if manufacturers assume prices of a good or service will decline in the future, they're going to increase supply today, trying to sell it before prices decline. All right. Finally, a leftward shift in the supply curve. Graph D as in dog. All right. Graph D as in donuts, down bottom on the right. Right. A leftward shift in the supply. What happens when the supply curve decreases? That drives up equilibrium price, and quantity at the new equilibrium is down. It goes lower. So when a leftward shift in supply, a decrease in supply, price up, quantity down. What will cause a leftward shift or a decrease in supply? If firms have to pay more for resources, if there's a decrease in the number of sellers, if there's an increase in increase in taxes on producers, if there is a decrease in the number of subsidies. So when Trump took office, he decreased subsidies for solar producers. Right? That would cause a leftward shift. If there's a temporary disruption to technology, that would decrease supply. Price of other goods, the same idea. Okay, let's say we're analyzing the market for soy, and in this case, farmers believe the price of corn will go up in the future. Well, then there's going to be a decrease in the supply of soy based on the price of other goods. Right? And then price expectations. If producers expect price of the product they're selling is going to rise in the future, there'll be a decrease in supply today. Make certain you familiarize yourself with the non-price determinants of demand, the non-price determinants of supply, and by all means, understand how shifts in the curve, increase, decrease, demand, supply, ultimately affect equilibrium price and quantity. That's the whole goal of our market analysis. Oh no, students, don't look now. Complex cases. Everything in life should be as simple as possible, if not simpler. Who said that? Let me give you a hint. A man exponentially smarter than Mr. Kelly. And his name was Albert Einstein. Everything in life should be as simple as possible, if not simpler. And yet we're going to introduce complex cases. What happens if we're analyzing a market scenario and there is one event affecting demand and simultaneously another event affects supply? Well, look on the board here and you see a word that we haven't discussed yet. It begins with an I and ends in ate, indeterminate. Indeterminate is a fancy schmancy way of economists admitting there's not enough information to make a definitive judgment on either price or quantity. One of our two variables, we won't be certain what exactly happened to that variable. Remember, the entire purpose of market analysis is to determine what happened to equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. So I'm going to briefly discuss one of the examples of the 11 market scenarios that was given in the review packet. The market for whitefish, where whitefish becomes more popular with consumers, things like cod and tilapia. At the same time, the government cuts back or restricts the number of days that fishermen are allowed to extract the fishy from the ocean. All right. So we have one event affecting demand, and that's an increase in the taste or preference for whitefish. At the same time, an event affecting supply. If fishermen, the boats aren't allowed to fish, let's say they reduce it from 45 days to 30 days, there's going to be a decrease in the number of sellers. So those are two market events. So the increase in demand resembles graph A up on the left, right? So what happens when there's an increase in demand because of an increase in taste and preferences, a rightward shift to the demand curve? That has the effect of price going up and quantity increasing at the new equilibrium when D1 shifts to D2. At the same time, there's a decrease in the number of sellers, a leftward shift in supply similar to graph D. And what happens there? Well, that also causes price to go up, but causes quantity to go down. Now, I love watching Sesame Street with my nieces and nephew because there's so much adult humor that you missed when you were 4 years old. Remember that segment, which one of these things is not like the other? It's that simple, boys. So we look at the graphs again and we say, okay, the increase in demand, graph A, definitely caused price to go up, quantity to go up. The decrease in supply, graph D, definitely caused price to go up, but quantity to decrease. So price definitely went up. Quantity is what we call indeterminate. So if the market scenario info given to you in the problem doesn't distinguish or say there was a significant increase in the taste and preferences and only a small decline in the number of sellers, there's no way to determine what happened to one of the two variables, in this case, quantity. For certain, price went up, quantity is indeterminate. So be careful when asked to analyze market scenarios where two events, one affecting demand and one affecting supply, occur simultaneously. The outcome will be one of your two variables, price or quantity, will be indeterminate. Now it's time to put students to work, utilizing the tools of market economics and the concepts of demand and supply. Analyze market scenarios. Easy peasy lemon squeezy, follow the four-step approach. Number one, identify the market, and by all means, gentlemen, draw a graph. And look, in red it says a correctly labeled graph. On the AP exam, you actually get 1 point towards your score just by drawing the graph correctly and labeling it. Label the vertical axis as price, label the horizontal axis as quantity, label the downward sloping curve as demand, the upward sloping curve as supply. Identify equilibrium, price, and quantity to start. Every time you analyze a market scenario, it begins with the same number one approach. Number two, here's where it gets a little challenging. Read over the scenario and identify which non-price determinant of demand or supply, or the rare case both, are changing in the market. It's vitally important to identify which of the 5 non-price determinants of demand or the 6 non-price determinants of supply is affecting the market. After you've done the heavy lifting in number 2, then demonstrate what you have learned and identified in part 3. Demonstrate the change in demand and or supply on the graph. Now, if there are 2 events, one affecting demand and one affecting supply, and it does not specify the magnitude of the shift, in other words, it doesn't say there's a large increase in demand or a small increase in supply or vice versa, you must draw 2 graphs. Finally, and most importantly, ding, 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 identify the effects on market equilibrium. How will the events affect equilibrium, price, and quantity? It is vitally important to the outcome of your analysis to perform step number 4. Otherwise, you took the ball all the way to the goal line and you didn't cross the finish line. It's time to put students to work. Analyze these 3 market scenarios. Use the tools of demand and supply to determine what happens to equilibrium, price, and quantity in each market. Number 1, pandemic incentivizes millions of older Americans to retire early and millions of other workers to leave the labor force for fear of contracting COVID-19. How will this phenomenon affect the U.S. labor markets? Avocados. Oh, I love guacamole. Avocados continue to grow in popularity with U.S. consumers. At the same time, a severe drought in California negatively impacts the avocado growing season. Notice, how will these two events affect the market for avocados? And finally, potential home buyers looking to purchase an existing home, not newly built homes, and existing homes, believe housing prices will fall substantially in 6 months. How will this news affect the current market for existing homes? All right, now the answers are on the videos to follow, but guess what? You can't have the answers yet. Pause the video. Right, you've been watching for 20 minutes. Pause the video here and work on these 3 market scenario problems and determine, based on market economics and the tools of demand and supply, what is the outcome at the new equilibrium. Okay, time to see how we did, students. Pandemic incentivizes millions of older Americans to retire and millions of other workers to leave the labor force for fear of contracting COVID-19. How will this phenomenon affect the U.S. labor market? Well, the market should have been obvious, the U.S. labor market. The non-price determinant, remember, in a market for labor, the buyers, downward sloping demand, businesses, supply, upward sloping supply, sellers, that is households. So the non-price determinant is a decrease in the number of sellers. Fewer individuals are willing to sell their labor in the labor market. That will lead to a decrease in supply, similar to graph D on our 4 graph examples. Leftward shift of the supply curve. What happens at the new equilibrium because of the decrease in supply? Price up, quantity down. Now here, price is wages. And look what happened to wages after the reopening of the economy post-pandemic. Wages went up in price quite substantially. Now, that's not the only factor affecting wages, but there has been a decrease in labor participation post-COVID. The second market scenario, avocados. So first, avocados continue to grow in popularity with U.S. consumers. Let's tackle this portion of the problem before we move on to the second market event. Anytime a good or service becomes more popular, that's a non-price determinant of demand, increased taste and preferences. So the market is obviously avocados. The non-price determinant, taste and preferences, will increase. That will cause a rightward shift of the demand curve. The whole entire curve shifts from D1 to D2. Result at new equilibrium, price up, quantity up. If that were the only thing that had happened in this market scenario, your work would be finished. But it wasn't just the factor affecting demand. At the same time, severe drought in California negatively impacts avocado growing season. So again, the market's avocados, the non-price determinant, decreased number of sellers, or you may have come up with decrease or disruption in technology. Either one of those non-price determinants will work. That causes a leftward shift of the supply curve. Leftward shift of supply causes what? Price increase, quantity decrease. Again, if this were the only event that happened, the new equilibrium would be higher equilibrium price, decrease in equilibrium quantity. But considering both simultaneously, what happens? Final results, the increase in demand drove up price. The decrease in supply drove up price. The increase in demand quantity up. The decrease in supply quantity down. Price up, quantity indeterminate. That was a challenging one. Hopefully you did well on that problem. Last one. Market for existing homes. Now it says here, not newly built houses. So we're analyzing the market for existing homes, and buyers believe that prices will fall substantially in 6 months. One of the non-price determinants of demand is expectations. Expectations about future product price. So the market is existing homes. the non-price determinant expectations about future prices, and in this case, future lower prices. How will that affect the market? A decrease in the demand for homes now with the expectation of prices dropping in the future. At the new equilibrium, what happens? Leftward shift of demand from D1 to D2. The new equilibrium, price of homes down, quantity of homes bought and sold down as well. Hopefully you did well on this market analysis review packet.